Hey, welcome back to the channel, or just welcome, I guess, if it's your first time here. So recently, a friend of mine printed me up this savage Ork Warboss model for my Death Skulls army. You can find the STL of this beast over on Cults 3D, and amazingly, it's absolutely free. I'll stick a link in the video description in case you'd like to print one off for yourself. Anyway, as you can see, I've converted this mini a fair bit, replacing the head, adding a kit bashed boss pole, a shoulder mounted big shooter, and a few other gubbins dotted around the place. The main focal point here though, and the subject of the video, is the Primaris Intercessor being ripped open by the Warboss's mighty killer claw. Having read most of the Beast Arises novel series, there's plenty of examples I can think of where a giant, brutish orc tears a hapless Astartes limb from limb, so I guess this conversion was my attempt to bring one of those monstrous orcs to life. Overall, I was fairly happy with the conversion and paint job at this point. He fits right in with my other customized HQ units, like my warp flame wielding weird boy, and my big mech and mega armor. There was still something missing though. I wanted to challenge myself by attempting realistic gore effects for the first time. So here's me trying to add blood and guts to a Space Marine. Before I could add any connecting tissue between the Space Marine's two halves, I needed a supporting structure. My initial idea was to have the guts and gore stretching from one half all the way to the other, and I figured a wire support would work well for that. Luckily, I have plenty of that sort of thing in this highly organised box of scrap materials. There's all kinds of useful things in there, like this thing, and whatever this is. First, I went for this metal wire thing from the top of a champagne bottle's cork. It's called a muselet, apparently. Muselet? A muselet? A muselet? A muselet? Anyway. But despite the fancy name, it wasn't working out, so I went back to the scrap box and found some unraveled binding wire from an old notebook. To increase the strength, I took two equally sized lengths and twisted them together with a pair of pliers. Cutting off at the ends bit by bit, I eventually got the wire to roughly the right length. After hand drilling some holes on the Marine's torso, I glued the wire in place with some Gorilla Super Glue gel. With the makeshift support in place, I cracked out the green stuff. Green stuff is a versatile two-part epoxy that's used for all kinds of mini conversions. It's not that easy to work with, however, and it tends to stick to your fingers a lot. To avoid this, I put on some gloves and got ready to So I put on another pair of gloves and cut myself a healthy chunk of green stuff, mixing the blue and yellow parts together until the stuff became, until it became green. To make tiny Space Marine guts, I rolled out small pieces of green stuff into long, thin tubes. The baking parchment was there to prevent it from fusing to my cutting mat, and I kept water to one side so I could keep the green stuff moist without having to lick it. I wrapped the tubes around the wire using various sculpting tools, trying my best to make it look as though the guts were emerging from the two halves of the torso. This was honestly a lot of fun to do, and I got a little carried away the first time. Yeah, it was looking rough, so I started over again using slightly thinner tubes this time. Now, I was pretty happy with this result, but looking at some reference images, I realised the guts were still looking excessive. Then again, Space Marines are much bigger than the average man. So with their transhuman physiology and extra organs, this amount of guts isn't too unrealistic, right? Come on, he looks like he's playing a Space Marine accordion in a French cafe. So yeah, I decided to gut the guts again. With the guts totally scrapped and the wire almost fully removed, I rolled out some more tubes of green stuff and started fresh, this time with the guts dangling down instead. I botched the first attempt pretty badly. As for the second attempt, it wasn't much better. Third time lucky, and what do you know, I got a result that was decent enough for me to call it a day. After that, I moved on to the lower half, where I kept it simple by picking away a blob of green stuff with a hobby knife until it looked kind of like torn flesh. Once the guts cured, I coated them in a couple of layers of liquid green stuff mixed with water. This adds some texture and partially fills in gaps between the tubes of solid green stuff. Having primed the guts black, I went in for a base of Warlord Purple from Vallejo. Great colour, poor coverage. It took 3 coats to get a solid base layer on this. Next, I mixed Secret Weapons Neo Purple with some Citadel Larmian Medium and slathered it over the guts and torn flesh. Nasty. I also wanted to add some fleshy details to the intestines because they were looking kind of bland. In the end, I mixed up Evil Sun Scarlet, Ishabti Bone and Warlord Purple to get a nice fleshy pink. With a fine brush, I etched tiny horizontal striations all along the tubes of guts. It didn't look the best, but it added some interest that I felt was missing. This was followed by a watered wash of Nuln Oil Gloss to tone down the colours and give the guts a wet, sticky appearance. All that remained was the sacrificial offering to Khorne in the form of blood for the Blood God. Someone told me that you can create a convincing blood spatter effect by dripping an old toothbrush in this paint and flicking the bristles at the target. I probably should have tried it on a test model first to see if it worked, but you know.
I started blasting. Bang! Bang!
I think the Blood God would be satisfied, but for the sake of variety, I also mixed some up with a dark brown and daubed it onto various parts of the Marine's torso. In my last video, where I painted up some xenomorphs from the Aliens board game, I learned that Yuhu glue doubles up as a pretty sick drool effect for minis. And if you mix that glue with some blood for the Blood God, you have yourself some disgusting, realistic looking gore. So here I am mixing these two up, and then the phone holder on my filming mount broke. I just got that, man, come on. Alright, I'll just balance my phone against a cup to film the rest then. So here's a horrifically overexposed, wobbly shot of me applying the strands of gore for the first time. The footage is bad, but the principle is simple. Take a pointy thing, pick up some of the blood glue mixture, attach it to the desired part of the model, and then drag it over to another part. Hopefully, it sticks and you'll end up with some gnarly strands of fresh, bloody gore. I tried to connect the Yuhu all the way from one half of the Marine to the other, but it turns out Yuhu glue can't stretch that far while holding tension. Nevertheless, I kept trying to do the same thing unsuccessfully for several minutes. Desperate measures were needed. I found a piece of plastic rod, held it over an open flame, and stretched it apart while it was still melty to get this nice strand of clear plastic. Glued in place, and after a healthy coat of bloody red, it looks a lot better than it deserves to. But I wasn't done making mistakes. I began adding more and more of the gory Yuhu glue mixture to the model, ultimately ruining the paint job on all the guts and obscuring the detail on the Marine's shredded lower half as well. I was tempted to just give up here, but after a day or two I came back and painstakingly removed all of the gore effects, which in turn stripped off all the paint underneath. I ended up repainting the green stuff sections again, following the steps I'd already done once before, but don't worry, I didn't film it again. Mainly because my spirit was now about as broken as the shattered phone camera mount lying next to me. And here he is. You know, considering how many disasters we had along the way, I'm pretty happy with how he turned out. I did go easier on the glue gore the second time around, which is kind of crucial. Less is definitely more with that stuff. This video didn't really turn out how I wanted. It's not really a tutorial, is it? It's more of just a document of my descent into German adhesive-based madness. But at least I learned something. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to go ahead and do a heckin' like and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram, just miniquibble. Oh, and if you have any ideas for what I should call this new warboss of mine, then let me know down in the comments. And I'll say goodbye for now.